The morning was quiet in the way that rural land sometimes is. Not peaceful exactly, but still, the kind of still that makes sounds carry farther than they should. That's what found him first. Not a sight, a sound, something between a cry and a snarl, rising and cutting off, rising again. The kind of sound that doesn't belong to anything ordinary. He stopped walking and listened, and in those few seconds, before he even saw what was making it, something in him already knew this wasn't going to be a simple morning. He found it at the edge of a tree line, where the brush thinned out near a shallow creek bed. A bobcat, young, maybe 2 years old, compact and muscular, caught in a steel foothold trap that had locked around its front left leg just above the paw. It had been there long enough to wear itself down. The ground around it was torn up, leaves scattered, shallow grooves in the dirt where it had thrown itself in every direction trying to pull free. But the trap didn't move. It never moved. That was the whole point of it. He stood at a distance and took it in carefully. The bobcat saw him the moment he cleared the brush, and what happened next was immediate and electric. It lunged. Not toward him, there wasn't enough chain for that, but the motion was full-bodied and explosive, a full lunge toward the end of its reach, mouth open, ears flat, a sound tearing out of it that was equal parts fury and terror. Then it hit the end of the chain, snapped back, and reset. Watching him, panting, waiting for him to come closer so it could do it again. He didn't move, not yet. He understood what he was looking at. This wasn't aggression in the way people think of aggression, calculated, targeted, mean. This was fear operating at full volume. A wild animal in pain, restrained, with a large unknown creature standing 20 feet away. Every instinct it had was screaming the same thing. Threat, threat, threat. The lunge wasn't a choice. It was the only option left to an animal that had already exhausted every other one. That distinction mattered. It changed how he carried himself as he began, slowly, to close the distance. He lowered his profile first, crouching slightly, making himself smaller, less vertical, less predator-shaped. He dropped his gaze away from the bobcat's eyes. Direct eye contact in those moments is a provocation whether you intend it or not. Prey animals know it. Wild animals know it. So he looked just beside it, let his peripheral vision do the work, and moved in increments so slow they barely registered as movement at all. A few inches, pause. A few more, pause again, not performing calm, actually trying to be calm, because animals read the thing underneath the performance and they're rarely wrong about it. The bobcat lunged again when he got within 10 feet. Same motion, same sound, same snap at the end of the chain. He absorbed it without flinching, without stepping back. Not because he wasn't afraid, his heart was going hard enough that he could feel it in his throat, but because he understood that pulling back would reset the dynamic and cost him ground he'd have to earn again. So he held his position and waited for the animal to settle, which it did, slowly, the way a wave recedes, the energy bleeding out of it until it was standing again, trembling, watching him. He could see the leg clearly now. The trap had caught it cleanly. No bone showing, no blood, which was something, but the tissue around it was swollen, and the animal had clearly been pulling against the mechanism for hours. Every time it shifted weight onto that leg, even slightly, something moved through its expression that didn't need any translation. He'd seen pain before, in animals and in people, and it always looks approximately the same, like the body is trying to get away from something it can't escape. He thought about what the next few minutes were going to require. The trap had a spring-loaded release mechanism on either side, 2 compression points you had to push simultaneously to open the jaws. In practice, this meant getting both hands into the trap, close to a restrained wild animal in distress, for long enough to work the mechanism. It would not cooperate. He knew that going in. The bobcat would react the moment he made contact, maybe before. He would have to move during the pauses, the brief, unpredictable windows when the animal was catching its breath, and its system was cycling down from one surge of panic before the next one built. He knelt down in the dirt about 4 feet away, and stayed there for a moment, not advancing, just existing at that distance, letting the bobcat register that he was still, and that nothing was happening. The animal's breathing was audible, rapid, shallow, through its nose. Its eyes never left him. But the lunging had stopped, for now. And in that fragile pause between fear and exhaustion, he recognized what he had. Not safety, not trust, not anything that tidy, just a window, small and closing. He moved toward the trap. The first attempt lasted less than 3 seconds. He reached in, fingers finding the left compression point, and the bobcat exploded. No warning, no build-up, just pure reflex, a strike that caught the air inches from his forearm before he pulled back. He sat back on his heels and breathed, not hurt, not yet, but close enough to understand exactly how little margin he was working with. He waited for the animal to cycle back down. This was the rhythm of it: advance during the quiet, retreat when it broke, and never let the retreating become permanent. Each time he pulled back, he came back a little steadier, a little more familiar to the animal, or at least that was the hope. Whether the bobcat was actually registering him as something other than a threat was impossible to know. What he could see was that the intervals between surges were getting fractionally longer. The exhaustion was real. The trap had been doing its work on the animal long before he arrived. He adjusted his angle on the second attempt, coming in lower, slower, talking in a low monotone that wasn't words so much as sound, steady, unremarkable, something to fill the silence so his movements didn't arrive without warning. His left hand found the compression point and held it. The bobcat trembled but didn't lunge. He brought his right hand in. It lunged. He held on for half a second longer than the last time before releasing. Progress, if you could call it that. He sat back again, forearms resting on his knees, and looked at the trap rather than the animal. The mechanism was stiff, older hardware, probably set and reset enough times that the spring tension had compounded. It was going to take real pressure to open it, which meant real time with both hands committed, which meant real exposure. There was no cleaner version of this available to him. On the third attempt, he got both compression points simultaneously. The bobcat threw itself sideways and the motion nearly broke his grip, but he bore down and felt the jaws give, not open, not yet, but give, the resistance shifting from impossible to merely difficult. He held on. The animal was screaming now, that hollow, terrible sound, and his hands were shaking with the effort, and then something released in the mechanism, and the jaws swung open, and the leg was free. He pulled back fast, and put distance between himself and the animal. His hands were shaking. His breath was coming hard. He looked at the bobcat, and the bobcat looked back at him. This was the part he hadn't let himself think about. Everything up to this point had a logic to it, a problem, a method, a sequence of careful decisions. But now the trap was open and the bobcat was free, and there was no procedure left to follow, just the two of them, 4 feet apart, in the sudden absence of everything that had structured the last 20 minutes. He stayed perfectly still. The bobcat didn't run. That was the first thing, the thing that didn't make sense, the thing he would turn over in his mind for a long time afterward. A free wild animal with open terrain in every direction, and it didn't move. It stood where it was, weight shifted off the injured leg, sides heaving with each breath. Its eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that had changed somehow, less frantic than before, something harder to name, not calm, not trust, just a quality of attention that felt different from the pure reactive fear of minutes ago. He didn't move either. He wasn't sure he could have. Several seconds passed, long ones. The creek moved quietly somewhere behind him, and a bird called once from the tree line, and then went silent, as if the forest had also decided to wait and see. Then the bobcat turned its head. Not away, sideways, just slightly, the way an animal orients when it's processing rather than reacting. A small motion, but it broke the locked quality of the moment, and he felt something release in his own chest that he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The animal took one step back on the injured leg, and absorbed the weight carefully, testing it. Then another step. Moving away from him now, toward the brush at the edge of the creek bed, its movements deliberate and quiet in the way that wild things move when they've decided something is no longer a threat. It stopped at the edge of the tree line. He would later struggle to explain this part. The bobcat paused at the boundary between the open ground and the woods and turned its head back toward him. Not a glance, a look, unhurried, direct, lasting long enough that he had time to register it fully and understand that it was happening. There was nothing to assign to it, no emotion he could responsibly name, but it looked at him, and he looked back, and for one strange and quiet second the distance between them felt like something other than distance. Then it stepped into the trees, and was gone. He didn't move for a long time after it disappeared. There was no particular reason to stay. The animal was gone. The trap was open on the ground beside him. The morning was continuing as mornings do, indifferent to what had just happened inside it. But his legs didn't seem ready to carry him anywhere yet, so he stayed where he was, crouched in the dirt near the creek bed, and let his breathing come back down to something normal. His hands were still shaking. Not from fear, or not only from fear, more from the particular kind of physical depletion that comes after sustained tension releases all at once, the kind of shaking that means your body was working harder than you knew. He looked at his hands for a moment, and then looked at the tree line where the bobcat had gone, already still and ordinary, no trace of what had moved through it minutes ago. He thought about the look. He knew better than to make it into something it wasn't. He understood, at least intellectually, that wild animals don't experience gratitude the way the word implies, that the pause, the glance back, the moment at the tree line almost certainly had a simpler explanation rooted in instinct and caution, and the animal's need to monitor a potential threat until it was safely clear. He knew that, but knowing something and feeling it are different operations, and what he felt, standing there alone in the quiet, was something that didn't fit neatly into any of the explanations available to him. Not wonder exactly, not sentiment. Something more like recognition, the particular sensation of having been genuinely seen by something that owed him nothing and had no reason to offer it. He picked up the trap and looked at it for a moment. Old hardware, rusted at the hinge, the kind of thing that doesn't know what it catches or care. He set it off to the side. Someone would need to deal with it eventually. Not his land, not entirely his problem, and yet here he was. He stood up slowly and brushed the dirt from his knees. The creek kept moving. The trees held their stillness. Somewhere deeper in the woods, maybe, a bobcat was putting careful weight on a leg that had nearly cost it everything, working its way back toward whatever its ordinary life looked like before this morning interrupted it. He started walking back the way he came, no different than before, mostly, a little quieter.